Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and since it's Women's History Month, I'm here today to talk to you about Dickinson, Season 1. Dickinson is a show on Apple Plus. It was created by Alina Smith, and it stars Haley Steinfeld as Emily Dickinson herself, one of the most famous poets of all time. Now, this show is a comedy drama, emphasis on the comedy. In fact, this show is very loosely based off of Emily Dickinson's life. Why? Because Emily Dickinson was a very private woman towards the end of her life. She basically just stayed in her house. She's known as the woman who dressed in white. She had a quirky sense of humor and stuff, but she was very private. A lot of her poems that were published always talked about two different things: death, and she wrote a bunch of letters to her best friend named Sue Gilbert. Many people believe that she was romantically involved with Sue, but there's been no proof. But a lot of her letters to Sue have been very passionate and stuff. And when it comes to her life, like I said before, many people come up with their own interpretations of how she lived her life because of that, of how private she was and stuff. She's so private, she didn't even like towards the end of her adult life, she didn't want none of her poems published anymore. However, her maid Maggie and her sister Lavina, after her death, she told Maggie to burn all her poems because she was like, keep them in Maggie's trunk. But Maggie decided not to. Maggie knew that, Emily's work needed to be out there for the whole world to see. And I bet they made a nice profit off it. So against her wishes, they published her poems. I don't know how I would feel about that, because if you want something to be private and that's completely to you and yourself, you wouldn't want the whole world to read and stuff. So I don't know how I feel about them going against her wishes. But, nobody would knew how famous she is today if it wasn't for them poems being published. However, when it comes to Emily Dickinson, how often do people really talk about her or her poems? I still don't really know none of her poems and stuff. I don't read poetry, but because of this show, I now know some of the titles. But this show, like I said before, take liberties to that of Emily's life. So much they should have put a disclaimer in front of the episodes, but they don't. However, starting with season 2, in the beginning intro of the show, a narration, they say, after the marriage of Sue and Alston, this show is going to be pretty much on a fictional base. So it would be nice if they would have said that in the beginning of the first season. I remember when I watched the first season, because this came out in 2019 and lasted for 3 seasons. I remember I saw just a straightforward trailer and I'm like, okay, cool. I like period pieces. I don't know anything about Emily Dickinson and stuff like that. So this would be cool to watching everything. I was shocked and surprised by all the humor that they had in this show. Not only that, but I was shocked and surprised by all of the urban slang that they use in this show. It was just strange and bizarre. And it wasn't even slang that white people would use totally for sure, or what up dude, yeah, they do say things like that, but they mostly use a lot of black slang, which was very strange, odd, and bizarre, especially since this show is taking place before the Civil War. The Civil War is about to start very soon. One thing that also surprised me was the depiction of black people in this show. I was very complex by that, let's just say. Because there were some black people back in those days that were free and everything, right? And they lived up north. But then there were some that's still in the South that were slaves and everything, because this show takes place in the 19th century. And so, like, what was baffling was like they had a free black man working for them named Henry. And I don't know if he's real or not. I haven't found no proof of him yet. So, like, he works for the Dickinson household, right? And they like him and everything. They treat him nice. They treat him good. But he's not so much like, I'll say, like a gentleman. You know what I'm saying? He don't dress really in all them fancy type clothes when he works for them. Sometimes when he's going to a special occasion, he'll dress fancy then. His wife owns her own like sewing shop that the family likes as well. So you think with that, and then also you will see some black people hang out with white people in a good way, and they dress more like gentlemen and stuff. So like because he's a former slave and everything, you think he would be treated better or whatever, right? Especially in this show because of how they depict certain races. Because all the white people use urban black slang, and even like give each other dap sometimes. Like Emily gave somebody like dap one time when they wanted to shake her hand, and so like there is a Asian gay character in the show. And you know how Asian people were treated back in those days. They were treated just as badly as the black people were and stuff, if not worse sometimes. They were never made into slaves, but my God, watch the show Warrior. I talked about that. They were treated terribly. So you think the show was taking more of a like modern day liberal type approach, but no. In one very special episode, Emily French treated Henry like crap. They did not want him in the room. They didn't want to look at him or any of that stuff. And it's just kind of like, well, what the world are y'all doing? So you have all this modern day twist to the show, even like hip hop music as the intro and stuff. You have Waz Khalifa as Death. But then y'all are still going back to the old days and treating black people like crap. I didn't stand that crap, And I was like, well, you're taking all these liberties with the show, especially with the gay, like, Asian dude who's hanging out with a bunch of like preppy white people. You could take more liberties with Henry and stuff, but they didn't want to go that route. So it was very baffling to me and stuff. Then in season 2, there's another episode where a bunch of black people. It's been a while since I saw episode 2. Not episode 2, but season 2. After watch that very soon. Because this show is only like 10 episodes long, and they're about 30 minutes and a little change. So about 34 minutes at most. So you can watch it in like a day's time. Heck, you could probably even watch like the entire series in one day's time and stuff. If you really push it. But for the most part, this show is very pleasant. I like it. I like the drama. I like the comedy. I just wish it was more historically accurate because, see, the show, they decided they was going to base this off of works of this one woman. And this woman is a scholar for a university. And she's researched like, Emily Dickinson to like death. Her name is Martha Neil Smith. And so they based this show off of like her books, and they had to get permission to use her books and stuff. However, they did not use her as a consultant. Now, I did find an interview that Vulture did with Martha, and they kept asking her, what are what are your thoughts on like the show, and what are your thoughts on like this and that and things that they interpret in the show, and she constantly kept saying, I don't know, because nobody knows and everything. She said she just based her research off of letters and poems and stuff like that, like many other people, because Emily was so private and stuff. But there are some things that are a bit more accurate. Like the whole Emily's father, they have a budding relationship throughout the entire first season. Emily wants to be a free spirit. She wants to publish her stuff. She wants to be independent. because she is a very intelligent woman. However, her father wants her to stay in a woman's place, but yet he buys her all these books to educate herself. So that's very confusing. And Emily, and she said that Emily even stated in a letter, "Yeah, my dad buys me all these books and blah 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 and stuff like that." So that part could very well be true. When you do go online and you try to like find things on certain people's lives, like her sister Lavinia, it's very small on Wikipedia. There's not much. And I was very surprised to see the maid have her own Wikipedia page because on the show she barely does anything. However, there are some things that are accurate with the maid. She is Irish. She comes from a huge family. They grew up extremely poor. But it doesn't dive into how poor they were. But her maid has her own Wikipedia page. It pretty much tells the life of the maid before she came and worked for the Dickinson house. Now, what's interesting about the maid is that the show takes some liberties once again with her. In the show, she's like a middle-aged type woman, probably about like in her 40s. However, she didn't meet the Dickinsons until she was about like a teen or in her early 20s. And she actually didn't like working for them, as Wikipedia stated. But like she stayed there because they kept her employed for about 30 years or so. And she didn't want to, but she just grew accustomed to them and stuff. They would not let her leave because they like her butter. They say it was the best butter they ever tasted, but this is never depicted in the show. And so, like I said before, Emily hid a lot of her poems in the trunk of her maid. And the maid found them after Emily died, still working for the youngest sister, and then they decided to publish them. And, but then the maid later on left, went back home, and she just later, died a couple of years later and stuff like that. So I was very surprised that she had a Wikipedia page. I would assume she was like super, 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 super famous, but no, she's only known for taking the poems and publishing them. But it does depict more about her poor lifestyle. Like when she went to go work for this other family, she slept on top of the roof or under the roof or something like that. It's like, my God, like things were very hard back then for people. You think things are hard now. They had it even worse back then. And like I said before in my first episode review, it's so shocking how women had no rights back then. Men literally got to do whatever they wanted. White men were the only people allowed to vote back then. Not even white women. And of course, people of color were not allowed to vote, not even free slaves and stuff. And it's weird knowing that white men, well, we already knew this, you know what I'm saying, controlled all of America. And not only that, but other places in the world. And it's just insane how women literally had no rights. They weren't allowed to go to college. They weren't allowed to like work in certain jobs. They had to do more women type jobs. There were some that showed on the show that working in a printing press, but they weren't allowed to do much. And there were some women who did publish their books and stuff like that, but a lot of them used like a male name to publish their stuff because they just weren't allowed to publish it as a woman. And in the show, like they have her meeting some very famous people. They have her meeting Henry David Thoreau, and they also have her meeting Louisa May Alcott. However, in real life, there's no depiction of her meeting these people, like at all. But they just made it up for the show, so it's very annoying and everything because it's kind of like when you watch a show like this, you want it to be historically accurate, but it's not. They took a lot of freaking liberties with it. And there's been other shows like that before, like Rain or The Great, but they still kept to some historical accuracy. But with this show, they didn't. Now, when it came to those two other poets I mentioned and writers, because Louisa wrote Little Women and Little Men, and they say she respected their work and everything like that. Now, when it came to that of Thoreau, they made him look like a bumbling idiot who was just like a fraud and everything. So that's kind of weird. I never really read into him, so I don't know. But I don't know why they went that route. But then when it came to Louisa, they made her seem cool. There's a scene where like, cause it's funny, the actress who plays her was in the flight attendant, and so like I think also the girls or whatever it's called, and or girls, that Lena Dunham show or whatever. I can never get into that show, but anyway, she's talking about, I'm thinking about writing a book about a man who is a captain of a boat, and he's in search of just something like a giant sea creature. Nah, I won't write about that. But then she's all like, wait a minute, I have an idea. I'll write a book about a bunch of women. They're living in the house, but they're girls, and their father's not there. Nah, I won't do that. But then her and Emily, they go for a run. Emily's very shocked. Emily like, what, a run? Like, cause what the world? Women can run, but maybe they weren't allowed that then. I don't know. And so, cause Emily, she frolics a lot, but she doesn't never run on the show. So her and that lady, they ran in their dresses. And it's funny. It's like really cool. It's an awesome scene. It's like they hike their skirts up, their long, long, long skirts, and they're just running in the field with their boots on. And Louisa just talking about like stuff she wrote and things she published and everything. And she never looks down. She just keeps running and talking. And it's a cool scene because Emily's never ran before, so she's exhausted and crap. But when it comes to this show, I've already talked about the first episode. Go watch that. My camera cut off. I just wish that he was an actor, you know what I'm saying? Because he has a really cool look to him. Now, for the intro, I love the intro. I love the music. Well, it's not really an intro. It's more like a title card sequence, but with music. And it has really good playing music. Now, the title card intro changes with every episode. It's very well done and animated. So Emily, played by Haley Steinfeld, is the main character. She's quirky, she's weird, she hallucinates a lot. In the show, they depict her taking opium at a party, which there's no indication of that in real life. When she's high and hallucinating, she talks to a giant bee. Oh boy. She's very young, she's very independent. I think she's probably like an adult age, but like young or something like that. She wants to be independent. She hates being born a woman. She wants to do things like a man. She constantly writes poems with a teeny tiny pencil that's down to its nub. All of her poems, some poems are longer, some are very short, some are just phrases. They're sometimes on like ripped up tiny sheets of paper and stuff. She constantly is writing about death. She is constantly writing about Sue. She writes tons and tons and tons of letters to Sue. Um, on the show, she is madly in love with Sue, but she hates that her brother Austin is dating her. Sue and Emily, they even make out while Sue is still dating Austin. Emily loves like the forest and like flowers and this giant tree. When her father becomes like a House of Representatives, he wants to tear down the forest and put like a railroad there and stuff. Emily is very opposed to this. Her tree is like where she writes like some of her best stuff, she says. We never really see her hang out at that tree, it's probably except for that one episode. She goes to Thoreau's house trying to get inspiration for him. And he's all like, why do I care about your forest and your tree? And she's all like, because you talk about forests and how you like them. He's like, yeah, I like my forest. But why should I care about your forest? And everything. And, she's constantly being pursued by a guy named George. George is like her friend. And he's madly in love with her. George pisses her off all the time because she tells him she's not in love with him, but they're like best friends. But then he goes and asks for her dad's permission to marry Emily, doesn't even ask Emily. It's weird how back in those days they used to do that crap. And it's like somebody's like ownership of somebody. She doesn't find this out at first, but when she wants to read a play by Athea, or about Athea, about a black man, George is very opposed by this. He's all like, maybe we should ask your father for permission to read this play. Like, I don't think he would approve. There's some inappropriate stuff. Perhaps me and your brother should read through this play and take out all the inappropriate stuff, dealing with that of a black man. And so when the topic of slavery comes up, he's all like, now, I'm not for slavery, but I have some families that are down in the South and they have slaves and they're very pro that and everything. And so I just let them do what they want. And she's very upset by this. And to the point where she embarrasses him in front of everybody and tells him to get out her house and everything. This angers him when he starts dating another girl, but it doesn't last. He decides he's gonna move to California, and I think work in the gold mines, I think, or something like that. I can't remember. And so we never see him after that. And so Emily, I'm trying to look. Emily, she basically just spends her time like writing poetry, hallucinating, going about the days, like, aggravating her father. Her father and her have a very butting head relationship. Um, because she wants to publish her stuff, he does not want her to. When she meets a guy named Ben, well, actually, I'll get him later. Her mother wants her to be married, wants her to move out the house. It's ironic. I've talked about this before. Like, so if it's the 19th century, it's like the 1800s. And even back in those days, adult grown people used to live at home with their families. It's weird how all that's changed now. Um, Even in the early 1920s, they still lived at home with their parents and stuff. But it's so taboo now. And it's only been a couple of, from 1920s to say, I don't know, 1950s, like 3 decades, that all changed and stuff. And it's weird how times are changing. And that's like so taboo. Now, if you're like an adult living at home with your parents, you get made fun of and stuff. They say, oh, you're like some dude, typewriter, not typewriter, but on the computer down in the basement, screaming at people, screaming woke and everything like that. And so, like, it's weird how things like that have changed. And so her mother is very jealous of her in the show because the father seems to like Emily more than he likes his own wife. Emily's very educated and that pisses off her mother. Her mother is just a housewife and wants to be the best one she can. Now, when she meets a guy named Ben, I was very shocked by this turn of events. She falls in love with Ben, which, because the show, they depict her being in love with that of Sue. And so it was very odd that she went and fell head over heels with that of a man. The reason why she fell head over heels with him was because she was pretending to be sick. She wanted to stay home and not be disturbed and just write like poetry and stuff. And so she had to fake it to the doctor, pretending to be sick and stuff. That was a pretty funny episode. When she goes to get a book in her father's study, she meets Ben. And Ben works for her father when her father was running for the House of Representatives and everything. Ben, like I said before, worked for her and her father and stuff. And they just started having a very cute, little friendly, like, friendship and everything. That later turned a little bit into like flirting. He's like a law clerk, Ben Newton. Ben, I believe, was a real person in real life, but there's no depiction that those two got together. Ben wears a fake wedding ring on his hand and stuff like that, kind of like to steer women away and all this other crap. But he tells Emily that throughout the half of the first season, the second half of the first season, those two start to spend much, much more time together. And cause see, when Emily and Sue dressed up as men to go see like a scholar and everything about volcanoes, it angered her father. And then Sue and Austin got into a huge argument when it came to Sue. Not Sue, but Emily and Austin got into a huge argument about Sue because he saw them making out. And so Sue left to Boston to be a spinster and everything. And a governess, they call them both things sometimes. I think a spinster and a governess, I believe, are the same thing. I believe. But a lot of women in these historical shows I see don't like being that. And because it's basically they work for single men who have kids, and sometimes the men get very handsy, and sometimes the kids are out of control. So anyway, when Sue and them all come back, they're all like, "Why are you talking and flirting with this man? For he's married." Because when Emily starts to like him, all of a sudden she wants to start doing house chore type stuff. She literally cooked an entire meal and set the table and everything when her mom was depressed. This is very unlike Emily in the show. Emily does not like doing house chores. She doesn't like doing house wife women type chores and stuff. She don't like cooking. She don't like cleaning. And yet she's doing all this for like this man. This was very shocking and everything. I don't know how I truly feel about that, because they are making Emily to be this very independent type woman in the show. And the show that, she wants to be equal as a man. That's the theme that they made for her in this show. But then they keep backtracking on the show. Like whenever her father is really pissed at her and her mama scolds her, talking about like, your father works very hard, he gives you all these books, he gives you this nice home, that nice desk and all this other stuff, and he is the man of this house and blah blah blah, and you should like appreciate that. So Emily makes her father bread when he's working late one night, and that was always kind of weirded me out, because I'm just kind of like, why would you succumb to that? And then the same thing with Ben, like, why would you succumb to that? And so it's ironic because she is pretending to be sick when she first meets Ben, but then Ben actually becomes sick. He becomes sick around the time the eclipse episode. And so his cough is getting pretty bad. And when you hear him coughing, you kind of know something's up, especially back in them old days. And so during the eclipse is a very great episode. I love how every person in town looked at the eclipse in a very different way. I love the music that was playing. Some people had the boxes with the holes and they looked into that. Other people had binoculars. Ben made Emily some like smoked out like window type things, glass I should say, like little shards of glass that had like smoke and black stuff painted on them to look at the eclipse. I don't know if that's accurate. Don't do that. Use the actual eclipse glasses, people, or do like Ben Stein says and use the whole box method. Some people was looking at the eclipse doing like white cloths of like fabric and everything. Others looking at them through the reflection in water. It was very beautiful how the director set that up, because everybody looked at it in a very different way. And and the music was somber and it was just like a lovely scene. But then Ben starts to cough a little too hard. He coughs so much that blood is smeared on his face, on his lips, smeared on his handkerchief. Emily rushes him to her house. Her mother is very upset. She's all like, "Do not bring death into this house." And Emily tells her mom, "You're dead inside already, so what does it matter?" Whew, because her mom has no self-confidence. Her mom literally just does what a man tells her and stuff. And so, like, Emily is caring for Ben in a very touching way. But then one day Ben is better and he's like, she gives him some chicken broth. And so it's stuffy in the room and she tries to let the window up. But then all of a sudden Ben is all like, there's a fly in the house, and Ben starts to freak out. And I mean freak out and everything. And he's all like, this bee will not leave me alone. She's all like, "What are you talking about? There's no," not bee, but like a fly. She's like, "There's no fly in the house." Then all of a sudden she hallucinates. There are flies covered on Ben's face. She realizes now that death is coming for him. She panics and runs out the room. When she runs out the room, she is now dressed completely different. She now has ruby red lipstick on her. Her hair is pent up, and she's wearing a red dress. The same red dress and the same way her hair is pent up in the makeup she wears when she goes and hallucinates and meets death. She goes out to the carriage and she talks to him. She begs him not to take Ben and everything. And he's all like, what's done is done and everything. She then begins to unbuckle the pants of death, about to perform services on him, talking about, this is exactly what you want. I'm going to give it to you so you won't have to take Ben. And he's insulted by this. He's all like, well, this ain't about you and I don't want you and everything. And, he makes her stop. And he's all like, I ain't jealous of no man, and I don't want you like that. And he tells her, get out my carriage and everything. The next episode, Ben has now passed. She is in mourning. She is sad. She madly fell in love with this man. She loved Sue. Sue was taken from her by her brother. She can't have Sue because she is a woman. And now Ben has been taken from her. And she just wallows and everything. And when it comes time for Sue and Austin to wed, Emily decides, what? Let's frolic and like outside. So they go outside in the wedding dress. They're running around. The dress is getting dirty and stuff like that. This pisses off Austin and everything. His dad is not there right now. And so like he tells her, because Austin knows that Emily is in love with like Sue, but he doesn't tell the rest of the family. But other people kind of suspect, but they don't really bring it up. And I'm surprised they don't bring it up in this show. This would have been a big dramatic thing, but the show doesn't really like to go in that route. And so he tells Emily, you are not allowed to go to my wedding. You must stay here locked into this room and blah, 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 and blah, 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 and stuff like that. And so that's where she stays and she hallucinates. She believes she's now dead in a coffin. She sees B, she sees death, she sees Ben's dead corpse. Ben's talking about how, oh, I was really in love with Austin and not you. So she hollers and screams. They can hear her screams during the wedding. She's banging on like the floor and everything. She just can't take it and everything. And then at some point, her father comes in towards the end of the episode. This is the finale. Before I get into what happens there, let's get into a little bit more about them. So he won't let her go see the scholar. There's a circus in town. He will not let her see that. And so Ben suggests, this is what I was going to bring up before, but I lost my train of thought. Ben suggests that like she should enter the Young Republicans poetry contest. And she does it, but she uses Austin's name. He takes the credit. She ends up winning. And they talk about it, how it's in the paper and stuff. The father knows Austin isn't very bright, and Emily wrote this. He is very angry at Emily. And he talking about why again have you embarrassed me on the most important night of all nights for me? It's election night. Well, no, it's not election night. It's after that. See, back in those old days, when you won or lost an election, nobody knew. It took about a month just to get like the results out. Well, at least for the presidential results. Like literally, after the results happen, it would take a whole month just for people in like America to find out. And so in the state that they live in and stuff, it takes a little bit longer as well. So he doesn't know if he's won or not. And he's all like, you have embarrassed me. She's all like, don't get mad at me just because you lost. He takes his hand and Will Smiths the crap out of Emily's face. He smacked her so hard, I thought teeth were gonna fly out. And then but like I said before, he ends up winning. So then at the end of the episode in this season finale, he's all like, I'm sorry I was away for so long and everything. It just took longer than what I thought. And I'm here now, and it's back me and you kind of like being like a team type thing, blah, 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 and stuff like that. And she tells him, plain and simple, My name is Emily Dickinson. I am a poet. I am a great poet, and I will be the greatest poet to ever live. And you will not stop me, and all this other stuff. Now, of course, she probably never said that because, even though she did publish her stuff in real life, like I said before, towards the end of her adult years, she just decided, like, not to. A lot of her family members at that time were dead and stuff. And it's just, she just locked herself in the house and stayed there and stuff. And so it pretty much ends. And so, yeah, she goes through like a roller coaster of a ride in this season, especially with things she wants to do but not allowed to do. Now, to briefly get into some of the other characters, her mother, Emily, I can't talk. Her mother, Emily Cross Dickinson, that's who Emily was named after. She's played by Jane Kokinski. I remember her from Ally McBeal. She was also in 30 Rock. She has a dry wit sense of humor in this that is hilarious. Her mom just wants to be the best housewife can be. She doesn't want a maid. Emily forces her dad to get like a maid and everything, which pisses off like, her mother. Her mother wants so badly for Emily to be married. She wants Lavina to stay home because Lavina's best at like house chores and stuff. Um, when her mother does not want her father going to the House of Representatives. When he does, she feels like he has abandoned her. She is so depressed, she doesn't want to do anything when her family comes to visit for Thanksgiving and stuff, or Christmas. I can't remember which holiday it was. And so, like, we get to meet her sister, or her Lavina. That's who the youngest daughter was named after. She has just lost her husband. Robert Picardo plays a man who works alongside Emily's father. And when he hears that she's newly single, he wants himself some so much that when Austin walks in trying to find Emily, he sees those two banging. And it's so funny to see the doctor from Star Trek Voyager banging. Oh boy, I swear. Anyway, her father, um, God, what is her father's name? Edward Dickinson. He runs for. See, it says he runs for Congress on in the show, but in real life he was for the House of Representatives and stuff. So maybe that's the same. I don't know. Whatever. I don't know. I hate politics, but he defects to the Whig Party and stuff. Now he is against slavery and stuff, but he kind of doesn't really show it that much in the show. Like, he is against it. He said he thinks it's wrong, but he wants to win. He wants to make people happy, so he thinks maybe compromising would be like the best and stuff. When one of Emily's friends asked, "Are you gonna abolish slavery and everything?" He's like, "Oh." Like, ha ha ha. He just kind of like brushes it off. Like, he doesn't really give like an answer. He's very stern in the show. He is like the breadwinner. He likes to read his newspaper and smoke his pipe and everything. Not that other kind of pipe. And so, like, he believes that men control the world and women should stay in their place. And back in those days, if a woman didn't stay in her lane, they will Will Smith them all up in the face and stuff. And that's very terrible. People should not do that crap. He loves his kids. He loves Emily to death, but Emily is so defiant to him. He even tries to make her happy by giving her like a house, a garden house, so she can grow all the flowers that she wants. Cause he says that, "I know you like flowers more than you like people and stuff." I have no idea if that's true or not. And so, like, when he leaves for a duration of like the season, because he has to go off to Congress and stuff, and it's really interesting, because her family is very well known in that town. Like he said before, his father squandered their fortune and he had to rebuild it and stuff. They've built lots of businesses and stuff like that, and a lot of people respect them in town. Lavina, also known as Lenny in the show, she is the youngest. She's also extremely stupid. She wants so badly to marry, and she's in love with a guy named Joseph. And so basically it's just she's there for comedic relief and to say really dumb things and do really dumb stuff. She has a guy paint her. He paints her exactly the way she is, but she wants to be bigger and everything. But he makes her skinny. She's like, I don't want to be like a poor looking skinny woman and everything. And so this was back in those days when women did like being skinny, but they also kind of didn't. Back in those old Greek Roman days, it was best to be big because that means you had money to eat. But then it's funny how times have changed. And so she decides she's going to draw herself, but naked. And she gives those drawings to Joseph. Joseph shows the entire town, even the mayor. So basically, he leaked her nudes. She is very embarrassed by this because everybody's laughing at her. She is crying and all this other stuff. And so, like, she decides, you know what, she's gonna get back at the town people by, or at least her friends at her drawing class, by putting up her news on the easel and everything. Nothing ever comes of that. They don't never really focus on that anymore. It's funny how the recurring characters never really have much to do. Even the main cast are technically recurring characters and stuff. Austin is in love with Sue, but he's also really good friends with that of Emily, his sister. He is furious when he sees those two making out at a party. This causes her to leave. When she comes back, he proposes and they get married. And for the most part, like, he is a bit dumb, like Lavina. His father tries to spite Emily by having Austin submit a poem for like something, and Austin cannot write worth like to save his life, and it's like terrible and stuff like that. And so him and Sue, they end up getting married, and Sue ends up pregnant. Sue is basically just like a plot device when it comes to that of Austin and Emily. She is in love with them both, but she's in love with Sue more. I mean, she's in love with Emily more. Emily, like I said, is constantly writing her letters. When Emily went to go, I can't get their names right. When Sue went to be a governess for this one man, we see in one episode he's touching her arm a little bit too friendly. Then in one episode, when she's reading a letter that Emily had wrote her, the man comes in and locks the door. You know what he ended up getting that night. And so because of this, she ends up leaving and she goes back to the Dickinson house. And so she said she came back for Emily, but she also came back to get away from that man. And Emily told her, like, my brother's in love with you, we can't be together, blah, 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 blah. Just tell him like you did it for him. So that's what she does. She told Austin, oh, I came back for you and blah, 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 and stuff like that. Throughout the episode, she's literally just like pops in, pops out. She disapproves of Emily flirting with Ben because she thinks he's married. Everybody thought he was married. And then so when she's getting her wedding dress like fitted, she's gained a little weight. She ends up pregnant. Now, she told Austin before this she doesn't want to have kids. She's scared because her entire family is dead. That's why she has to marry Austin. She has no money of her own. And so she tells Austin that, my mother gave birth to me and she died and everything. And she doesn't want that same thing to happen to her. But that ends up, she ends up getting pregnant and everything. But then she seems happy about it. It doesn't make no sense. Why is she now happy she has a child when she wasn't happy just one episode ago? And so, like, there are times when her and Emily are making out. There are times where they don't. They always sleep in the same bed and, and crap like that. And there's a really interesting episode where, like, there's some sexual stuff that does happen in this show. Like in the volcano episode, Sue lets Emily hook her and everything. There's a scene where Lavina is at the dinner table sitting next to Joseph and everybody's there, and she lets Joseph hook her and everything. And it's a very hilarious scene. You have to watch it. There's a scene where Austin's supposed to write that poem and he doesn't know how. So he needs some muse. So he looks at a picture of Sue. And his mother catches him whacking it and smacking it and everything. And so the mother is so funny. She's all like, it's because I held my legs together. And she's all like, he was coming, your father wasn't there, and Austin was coming out her chute. And so she just pushed him on back in and closed her legs and kept them in there longer than what he was supposed to be. Oh boy. Oh. Now, the Dickinson family, Emily and Austin and Lavina have a group of friends. They're mostly just there for comedic relief. There isn't much known about them. One of the girls, I don't know her name, the one who seems to be like the head B, she doesn't really like Emily that much. She thinks she's weird. She feels uncomfortable when Emily wants Henry to like, read for Theo and everything, and the whole like all their friends just like leave after that because they're upset that a former slave is hanging out with them and stuff. Um, Trying to think what else about she likes Austin and makes it clear, but nothing happens to them, and so the other friends, like I said, there's the Asian gay dude. He's just there for comedic relief. The other ones barely have anything to say. It's funny because there's a scene where they're with Lavina spending the night, and the dad is talking about they're being too loud, and he's upset because he don't know if he's won or not. But then you hear them upstairs talking about like the government, like they know everything about it. So that's a really funny scene. But they're just there for comedic relief, and they just pop in and out. Don't really know their names. There's no real motivation for them. The head girl is about to get married to some guy and some crap like that. That's about it. Henry, he is like, a former slave. He works as like the groundskeep over there at the Dickinson house. His wife has her own sewing place. Henry's a very nice man, but there's one episode where he does not want to go into town. Why? Because there are slave hunters from the South. There is a slave who ran away and they're looking for him. And so they discuss about how like um if the white people up north does not help the slave hunters like find that slave, they will have them arrested. Henry said he doesn't want to go into town, and they're all like, why not? You have your papers showing you're free. And he's all like, papers don't mean nothing because these slave hunters, they just want black people and they want money for it and stuff, and they'll rip your papers up, so they don't let him go into town. Well, Emily wants him to read for Theo, but he doesn't want to because, he knows how her friends feel about him. And so, but she's very adamant about it. But then the piano needs tuning, and so like he's looking for chores to do around inside the house because he sees those slave hunters around the Dickinson house. So he hides in their house, and when he goes to tune up the piano, Emily once again is being very, very impulsive and wants him to read for Theo. This upsets everybody in the room except for Austin. Austin is method acting being a woman for some reason. And so like um he reads the part even though he doesn't want to, and he's brilliant at it. Emily is excited, but she is the only one excited. Austin is just method acting, so he doesn't have no personality right now, and everybody else is like disgusted and want him out. And this is what causes her and George to be like upset at one another. And so he tells Emily, all I just wanted to do was like tune up the piano. And then we see him tune up the piano. After this, there is no discussion or no fallout between him and Emily. That's one thing that the show kind of pisses me off about a little, because it's kind of like they have all this stuff and dramatic stuff happening, but there's no fallout from it. When Austin sees Emily and Sue make out, there's no ruckus about it until like the wedding when he gets pissed over the dress and stuff like that. And mostly it's just the bickering between Emily and her father. Now Maggie, the maid, she's Irish and she's a maid. That's really just all to say about her. She's really good at cooking, but they don't talk about her butter in the show. She talks about how poor her family was and how they left poverty in Ireland in hopes to make a new life for them in America. And when Edward is elected, she's all like, I hope you will help out the immigrants and all this other stuff. But he doesn't really give her a straightforward answer and stuff. And so, like, Other than that, she's just there. There's really not much to her in the show. Death is played by Waz Khalifa. I was very shocked by this. He has a carriage, but his horses are ghosts. And they look blue and smoky and stuff. They have a very cool look to him. Now he's dressed very cool. He's dressed kind of like that voodoo dude and the Princess and the Frog, with the top hat, the glasses, stuff like that. However, Waz Khalifa is a rapper and not an actor, so his acting isn't very good. He's basically just playing himself, which is fine. He's just playing himself, but when you hear him talk up against like other actors, or mostly just Emily, because he only talks to Emily, you can see his acting just isn't very good. But he looks cool and everything. Basically, whenever he talks to Emily, he's kind of like, he has those seducing type eyes and swagger to like his voice and stuff like that, because she is very much in love with Death, that she told George and everything. Every time Emily goes to see him, she's wearing a red dress, red lipstick, and her hair is pent up. And they're always talking about stuff. They rarely argue except for that one time. And his cane is cool. Like his cane, the handle is glass and there's a red rose inside it. He's always drinking or he's always smoking and stuff. But it's just weird seeing him with all these tattoos and and like I don't know. It's just in that gold tooth. It kind of takes you out a little bit. I wish he was played by an actual actor. All in all, even though it's a weird, quirky show, it is still very good and stuff like that. It's funny, it's humorous, but it's not historically accurate. I wish it was. People go to watch these shows for historical accuracy. Why it only lasted for 3 seasons? Hey, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? But it is worth a watch. Like it's a little strange when they use slang. It's a little strange when you hear modern day music. It's strange when they're at like a opium party and they're twerking and stuff. But when you get past that weird goofiness, 'cause it is funny, but it takes you out of like focus, you know what I'm saying? It's a very cool show to watch and everything, and you do learn a lot about how life was back in those days, especially for like women. Happy Women's History Month, everybody. All right, I'll talk to you later. Bye.